Good morning and welcome. This is Sunrise Daily. I'm Ayo Makinde.
Well, it's a beautiful Monday morning from here in Lagos, and I'm Kayode Okikele.
Well, I don't know how beautiful it was an experience for you over the weekend, especially given all of the things that happened, on Saturday, and the reactions everywhere. Well, incidentally, it so happens that we couldn't get on Twitter to know what's happening all over the place. But some of the issues, some of the parts of the country in which we had disturbances, we'll come to all of that later on. But, we are still in the air of Democracy Day.
Yeah.
And yesterday, on the news at 10, Babajide Ogunsanwo was presenting some very, very interesting figures. And one of the information that I found very intriguing is what they call the Democracy Perception Index. It's interesting that, first of all, 84% of Nigerians consider democracy very, very important to us as a people. That's it right there. But guess what? 69% don't think that we are democratic enough. Now, that is a cause for concern, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. There's been a lot of debate over perception indexes or indices, as it were, saying it's only perception. You hear about corruption perception, and naturally you hear government say it's a perception. It might not be the real reflection of things. But when it comes to democracy, measuring democracy, in fact, even with corruption, but particularly now that we're discussing democracy, when it comes to measuring democracy, perception is key.
Reality.
That is the major thing. Because the simple definition of democracy is government of the people, by the people, and for the people. So if the people, which I mentioned 3 times in the definition of democracy.
And that's the government is only one.
I mean, speaks volumes, right? So if the people say that, well, I don't perceive that we are in a democracy, then believe me, that is quite important. And these figures, I mean, some might tell you, probably, does it even show the real picture, but it gives an indication of, what we have. And, there are different ways to actually categorize democracies these days. You have this continuum that talks about, authoritarian regimes, hybrid regimes, flawed democracies, and full democracies. If you had to translate this, which we'll definitely do during the course of the program, but just to highlight these issues, how people actually perceive what we are practicing as a nation. And this speaks volumes.
And perhaps to also confirm that this is how we feel about it, there was also that figure, Bajide gave about participation in presidential elections. Of course, that oftentimes every time we talk about voter apathy and that the figures of the voting population on voting day continues to diminish, that is a major problem. So, for instance, in 1999, 50% of those who registered to vote voted, and there were 60 million people in that election at that time. But in 2019, according to this figure, there were 103 million eligible voters, even though, of course, 84 million are the registered number of people. Only 27% of those people voted. And that is it right there. And it is also very, very troubling. That's what you have right there. You see that. It's only in 2003 that it rose. From then on, it continues to taper down. This definitely is something possible. So the question that I'm asking is, if we say that was ordinary perception, how about the reality of the figures from our elections?
Oh, this is like the bedrock of democracy, ensuring that people can exercise their franchise, elect the government, ensure that definition of democracy is actually practiced, government of the people, by the people, and for the people, ensure that the people actually go out and say, this is who I want to lead me. So if people cannot exercise their franchise, basically, then I mean, democracy is flawed from the foundation. I mean, whatever you build on it definitely will not be a proper democracy. And you see the figures declining. I know there's been a lot of conversation. There continues to be conversations. We're looking at the Electoral Act Amendment Bill being passed when? This month. So we have how many days to the end of June? About 16 days or thereabouts to the end of this month. We're still looking forward to that being passed. But we need to remove those encumbrances in the way of people voting. Because if 27% of the people who are eligible just voted, pretty much says that about 30% actually elected the leaders. So the 70%, I mean, I don't know what they will have chosen, but basically 30 or 1 out of 3 elected the leader for the whole 3. I think that makes sense, right? Markwe, good morning. What are your thoughts on this?
Happy Democracy Day, gentlemen. We're supposed to be observing a public holiday today in honor of Democracy Day, which we celebrated on Saturday. But the question is, are we really practicing democracy? And I think that the statistics that Babajide put forward yesterday night, if you prefer, really makes us reflect deeply on the state of our democracy, objectively at least, with facts presented to us. I mean, as you rightly pointed out, Kayode, if democracy is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, the question is how many people are actually showing their interest in this form of government as we currently practice it today. And if we're to continue with the figures as being presented there, which will pop up again, we have huge questions to ask as to why just 27% of the figures or numbers eligible to vote are constantly showing up. I think that the data there continues, Ayo, if you'd like to present it, as to some of the reasons why people believe that our democracy could be flawed. I think I saw there yesterday unfair elections being a huge consideration. Of course, there were a number of considerations to that, what they call that now, to the data. But unfair elections seem to, yes, unfair or fraudulent elections, economic inequality, and a number of other issues. You see them popping up right there. I think that, I mean, as Jide himself said yesterday, we need to take a look at ourselves in the mirror. People can lie to us, but about how you look. But I think that when you two look in the mirror, you can tell yourself the truth as to whether or not you're dancing naked in the public square or whether or not you're truly practicing democracy as the very name democracy goes. I mean, let's also not even go to how politicians tell us, oh, we have our own homegrown democracy. If the definition of democracy, and we all agree that democracy is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, and only 30% are coming out each time, and we've seen that the figures are continually dwindling every 4 years, then there are huge questions to be asked. Why is this the case? Why are the people not very interested in coming out to select their leaders? And some of it is what we're seeing on the screen right now. Limits on free speech, economic inequality, unfair or fraudulent elections are the 3 highest reasons, according to some of the research that has been done, and this is fact-based, as to why people are not coming out. And we don't seem to be the only ones that have the problem. I mean, look at South Africa. But ours is far higher than what the case is. And if you're to take a look at our population, I do not know the number of people who were sampled for this perception index poll, but usually it is taken for granted that the perception index is a general feeling of how, the populace might be feeling. So they sample a small population a small population and then take that to be the general feeling. Now, if that is the case, and we're looking at, that compared with South Africa, who has a smaller population figure than we do, then there are huge questions to be asked as to what we're really doing wrong and what we can do to better the situation. Gentlemen.
One of the things that's touching about this, Mokwe, is that the largest demographic in Nigeria are the youths. And the question you want to ask is, if the young people feel like they're not being represented enough, will they come out to vote? So what then are we doing to bridge that trust gap? I guess that's a question that government alone can answer. But for now, let's switch to the papers and see what the papers are saying this morning on the front pages.
Well, remember that talk about economic inequality as one of the, major pointers to how successful a democracy is or not. Well, take a look at the front page of the Nigerian Tribune. Gives you a picture of what's really going on. Food prices soar, push more Nigerians into poverty. Farmers in Katsina, Zamfara, Sokoto blame banditry, kidnapping, and FG speaks on recovery plan. So this is on page 2 of the Nigerian Tribune. Big one, I tell you. This is a huge one. You see the picture on the front page shows Governor Dapo Abiodun of Ogun State with President Buhari during his visit to the presidential villa on Sunday, and they're looking at some document. Perhaps there's an inside story to that one. You see, Amnesty International, Serap, 69 other CSOs ask Buhari to reverse ban on Twitter. Want UN AU to pressure FG. It's entering 2 weeks now since Twitter was suspended in Nigeria. And, the big question for a lot of people is, how will this, the reversal of the ban happen, really? Because it will seem the government has gone quite far. So it's going to be an interesting one to see how this will go.
Said, I'll keep that to my chest.
So that one's on page 2 of the Nigerian Tribune this morning. Clearly, the last of that one has not been heard just yet. There's one on top of the front of the nameplate. Buhari's speech exposed him as one not serving Nigerians' interests. That's coming from Afenifere. That's his Democracy Day speech, by the way. And you see the challenging president on grazing routes. There are a couple of other stories on the front page, really. Just this one before I leave it. 800 billion naira supplementary budget. Our army has no excuse not to defeat insurgency in Dume. So that's on page 3 of the Nigerian Tribune this morning.
The Vanguard newspaper leads with concerns about the president's speech of Saturday. Regional groups raise dust over Buhari's June 12 speech. That's what you have on the front page right there. A few writers there. Pande for Hanezi, Afenifere, Middle Belt Forum can fault Buhari's Democracy Day speech. Speeches not in Nigeria's best interest. That's ascribed to Afenifere. President didn't speak his mind, Ohaneze. It's hollow, lacks substance, says Pandef. Apologize for plunging Nigerians into hardship. MBF tells Buhari, we're concerned with realities on ground, not rhetorics, ascribed to Can. All of that you find on the front page and leads you to page 5 to find the details. June 12 lesson set aside for parochialism, says Governor Akeredolu. It's on page 11. You'll find that one. Ban on open grazing. Apprehension as herdsmen threaten to attack Delta. The story is on page 15 of the paper. June 12. This isn't democracy we fought for, says Okwadokun. That you'll find on page 34. And this one is interesting. Constitution review. Complete waste of time. Ascribed to Makinde. And I'm wondering, what's going on there? All right, well, on the back page is sports. Adesanya retains WFC middleweight title. And so many other stories you'll find on the back page. Will it be fair to not take Mr. and Mrs.? I think I'll let us do the picking ourselves this morning.
Oh, that's
Please, don't
rare.
even go there.
Wow.
Don't even go there.
Are you taking a break?
Don't
It's a
even
public
go
holiday, I know, but...
Okay. Okay. By popular demand. Mr.
There's
and
no
Mrs.
popular demand here. It is your demand.
All right, Mark, over to you.
Well, let's take a look at the Abuja inquiry. If you're going to practice democracy on this program, at least it should be that majority will be 2 against 1. And I think between you and Kayode, you cannot be running... You cannot be running a democracy there. Well, let's look at the Abuja Inquirer and let us see what they have on the front page for you. Land racketeering, allegation rocks development control is the lead story on the front page of the Abuja Inquirer. We are investigating, that's according to a director. Community fingers FCTA in kidnapping. Okay, so page 3 read, you might want to know what the details are of land racketeering, allegation rocks development control. Drug traces in Usuma Dam, residents alarmed. FCTA dismisses report. That's also there. That will be a source of water supply in the FCT. It's on page 5. You see right there, Buhari at 6. So it also happens that, well, it used to happen that when we celebrated Democracy Day, we're also looking at the scorecard of those who have been in office, especially those who assumed office May 29. But since Democracy Day has shifted from May 29 to the 12th of June, it's not so far. It's still within the same season. You know, some people take a look at the scorecard of those who are performing, or those who have been elected into office. Look at this. Buhari at 6, scorecard uninspiring. That's according to the CDD, the NGO, Center for Democracy and Development. That's their name. That's the full name. It's uninspiring. And some people will say maybe that's mild, but if you take a look at what uninspiring means, well, I guess people might want to take another look at it. Page 3 is where you find details. You have a number of stories just beneath the nameplate, some of which I'll leave you to do yourself when you pick a copy of the Abuja Inquirer, but you might want to see this one. Democracy Day, my growls against Buhari, says Otom. You want to know what his growls against Buhari is? It's on page 14. Let's leave it there for the Abuja Inquirer.
Well, take a look at the Guardian newspaper. The front page leads with Twitter, Facebook undecided on FG's licensing order as losses rise. Nigerians ignore India's coup for Twitter. Trend June 12 protests. Social media influencers, others count losses to the tune of 25 billion naira in 10 days. Well, yes, that's how the Guardian captures it this morning. But every time I hear the coup app, I keep wondering, is this like a coup d'etat or coup? But clearly it's spelled differently, pronounced the same.
How does it? It sounds like the sound of a bird.
Oh, right.
It's like the sound of a particular bird.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So this is Twitter in another way.
I didn't say that. I'm just saying that's what it sounds like to me, because I can just hear the bird from my village right now.
Oh, nice. Okay. There's also this story on World Blood Donor Day. Today is World Blood Donor Day, June the 14th, and you see 95% of donor blood units used in Nigeria unsafe, experts warn. So that's in parentheses. I mean, but let's take a look at the writers. Maybe there's some context. WHO NMA says Nigeria needs 2 million units of safe blood yearly, but produces only 25,000 units. So that's 1,975,000 units that we need. You see, Lagos requires 260,000 units of blood to meet growing demand. Whoa. Only 5% of blood come from voluntary donors. Family replacements, paid donors, major sources of blood procurement, and poor infrastructure, inadequate regulation, others mar provision of safe blood in Nigeria.
I think it'll be very good to really find out what safe or unsafe blood is. You know, we also talked about the World Sickle Cell Awareness Day. It was Upper Saturday, and one of the things that we heard also was that it's one of the ways you treat, at least you manage sickle cell, when you replace the blood in the bloodstream of the person who has sickle cell with another one that is better. So let's just, it'll be good to find out.
I think this should be part of civil education from the primary level. Everybody should, I mean, imbibe that culture. I know people have to give blood maybe when they want to get blood for a relative, so they have to. That's why you have the replacement, donation. But it needs to be a culture. Everybody that can should actually give blood. So that's the Guardian for you this morning.
Nigerian News Direct has something that would pique your interest, literally. FG to construct gas pipeline from Nigeria to Morocco. Yes, that's what's on the front page of the Nigerian News Direct this morning. What that is all about, you'll find out on page 4 of the paper this morning. And so many other stories on the front page to pick from. Okay.
Well, let's take a look at leadership for you. They have this grazing routes. Southern governors to meet over PMB stance. So, yes, the president's interview, which he granted, still has repercussions, has consequences. And you see right there, Southern governors to meet over PMB stance. I think he threw it squarely within the purview of the governors. Insist on open grazing ban. Northern states begin construction of grazing reserves as Niger, Plateau, Jigawa intensify work on projects. There's a page 4 read for you. You have a number of other stories at the bottom here. Bandits kill 2 in Benue, kidnap 12 in Zaria. Don't forget, these are 2 different areas. Benue is in Benue. Benue is Benue, and Zaria is in Kaduna. You also see a number of other stories there, international stories as well. Israeli parliament ends Netanyahu's 12-year rule. Police working with stakeholders to secure schools. Yes, we've heard reports of the police and security agencies taking over the protection of schools here in the FCT. Ogun woman sells 2 daughters for 3 million naira. What makes a mother go to that sort of extent? What pushes her there? You might want to read details on page 15. When you read stories like this, one is utterly disturbed that somebody will sell her own children. What sort of money will make her do that? What sort of situation? It's a page 15 read for you there. But you also have a number of other stories. NNPC Dangote share purchase to unlock 11 billion naira annual crude oil market. But let us see how that does. Is it on the back of the refinery? We've been waiting for ages for this refinery. When is it going to start, gentlemen? Do you have an idea? You guys who live in Lagos, let's leave it for you there on the front page of Leadership.
I'm just going to jump and pass that question, as they say. But for the Blueprint newspaper, Mark, the lead story. I mean, you talked about what happened in Benue, Zaria, but see this one happening in Imo. Gunmen invade church, kidnap woman, reverend sister in Imo. It's on page 6. You see, kidnappers demand 30 million naira for Ekiti farmers' release. Niger pupils now learn under special arrangement. Police confirm abduction of 12 in Zaria. Zamfara monarch suspended as death toll rises to 61. 61 souls. More details on page 15. And you see this one. Trade deficit increases by $8.805 billion in first quarter. Find more details in the inside pages. A couple of other stories, as you can see. It's quite packed front page for the Blueprint, but we'll leave you there for the newspaper.
And I guess that's it for the papers this morning. Up next are the issues for the day, right after now. Stay with us.
It's 3 years now since the president declared June 12 as Democracy Day and a work-free day in Nigeria in honor of the winner of the 1993 presidential election and for all those who fought for the sustenance of democracy. And to mark this day, the president addresses the nation. He begins by celebrating the country for what he calls the freedom that exists and for the unity of Nigeria as a country. He goes on to acknowledge the can-do spirit of Nigerians, which according to him has kept the country together, promising to reinvigorate the fight against insecurity and insurgency.
I join you all today to commemorate and celebrate our Democracy Day. It is a celebration of freedom and a victory for one people, one country, and one Nigeria. Once again, I want to render my sincere and heartfelt condolences to the families and friends of our gallant servicemen and women who lost their lives in the line of duty and as sacrifice to keep Nigeria safe.
The president also insists that he's committed to going after those behind what he calls the senseless arsons, kidnapping and murders across the country, saying he shares the pain of families and direct victims of ransom-seeking criminals.
Let me assure my fellow citizens that every incident, however minor, gives me great worry and concern, and I immediately order security agencies to swiftly but safely rescue victims and bring perpetrators to justice. Fellow Nigerians, when you elected me as your president in 2015, you did so knowing that I will put an end to the growing insecurity, especially the insurgency in the northeast. But the unintended consequences of scattering them in the northeast push them further in-country, which is what we are now facing and dealing with.
On the economy, he lists the intervention of the government and the Central Bank of Nigeria in driving economic growth over the last 6 years, targeted mostly on agriculture, power and healthcare.
The Economic Sustainability Plan, our rebound plan for the COVID-19 pandemic, developed in 2020, is currently being executed. The plan is primarily focused on the non-oil sector, which has recorded phenomenal growth, contributing over 90% to the GDP growth in the first quarter of 2021. Though marginal, we have recorded GDP growth over 2 quarters, second quarter of 2020 and first quarter of 2021. This is evidence of a successful execution of the Economic Sustainability Plan by the federal government.
The president closes his address by acknowledging the agitation for constitutional reforms, asking Nigerians to look towards the National Assembly for constitutional amendment as it's within their purview to do so. He promises to hand over a free and fair electoral process, as well as restating his commitment to the pursuit of a fair society where everyone can feel proud.
Thanks for staying with us. So, that's where we are going this morning. A general assessment of how far we have come as a nation, 22 years and counting into our democracy, this Fourth Republic in particular. Mr. Chris Okeke joins us this morning. He is a legal practitioner as well as a policy analyst. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much.
I think it's only fair to take your general assessment of everything that you see going around. There have been speeches made, both by the president and by state governors. On the one hand, the president is appealing, for understanding, generally is appealing for understanding, while some state governors say, as far as they're concerned, that people should go ahead and defend themselves and stuff like that. So what do you make of this general mood in the nation? Because it would seem like the only topic on the table is insecurity.
Thank you very much. Essentially, societies evolve. Essentially, societies are made of humans. And one thing about humans and evolutions are inputs. Inputs from man, inputs from humans. And it's important for whoever that has a duty to get these inputs looked at. So review, analyze, and depending on what he wants and what he's looking for, make decisions that are consistent with those inputs. I think that is what I think should be what we should be looking at, as it is today.
Okay, but is that what you're seeing? Is that what you see happening?
Whether or not it is, clearly there's some difference between the inputs now and what we are actually seeing. However, once you're familiar with how society is run again, right from the cradle of time, and right from what today we call democracy, particularly remember what we call our fundamental rights today has its roots in the Magna Carta in the United Kingdom. It's always a question of friction, discussions, reviews, even when there have been some exceptions here and there. But not exactly what they should. It looks to me that we'll get to what we think we should get.
You've only spoken about input.
Yes.
But people are more concerned about the output. Because, you've talked about the people. Society is made up of people.
Yeah.
Society is made up of two sections. Government, whether it's whatever type of government it is, and the governed.
Yeah.
And the governed is always constant. But the government can be based on certain dynamics, whatever dynamics may be. So it is the government that needs the inputs. But from where? Has to be from the people, right?
Clearly.
But the people need the output. So whatever the input the government is getting, or whoever is getting, if the output is not what the people expect, that friction you're talking about seems like it's just starting.
That's what it is. And that is the definition, that's the differential between what we all describe as governments, between what we call societies, between what we call as progressing societies and non-progressing societies, including stagnating societies, including backward-moving societies. It is the relationship between this input and output that classifies, that differentiates, that categorizes. So what we are saying essentially is, what category do we belong to? That's exactly what they're talking about. Input, output, the people. Even the government is part of the people.
Absolutely.
The difference is that today they are sitting on the high horse and on a high table. High table, I think, they could choose to convert that high table to a high horse. But wherever it is, whether on the high table, whether on the high horse, eventually they will come down. And once they come down, they also want to join the people. Some few years ago, the people on the high horse today were brandishing and masquerading as the people. It's also a matter of time. They certainly will, because that is only the dynamics of life and living. They will also come down from the high horses. High horse, not high horses, high horse, because it's just one horse. Yes. They certainly will come down from the high horse and they want to come to masquerade as a people.
Masquerade.
Who does it?
They don't actually come.
What I mean by masquerade as a people is, for instance, you see people today who are taking undue advantage, if I choose the word undue advantage, of what they consider as their privilege. Now, yesterday, they were here with us, some few years ago, and a day like yesterday, and a day like today. They have made all the effort, sitting on this seat, discussing and pretending to be Democrats. And today they are there. They are not here. They are rather using tear gas on people. And then I'm pretty sure in another short while, the studio will still be here. They will come down. I want to play around with you. I want to play around with you. I want to pretend to be a friend. I want to tell you, we're Democrats.
You know,
we fought for this. We fought for this.
You just painted a very interesting cycle.
Yeah.
Ironically, we have two horses on our coat of arms, so I don't know if that's we're talking about the horses. But, you know, so as it stands now, some of the people will eventually get on those, or that horse, as it were, and then the cycle continues. But, you know, there's been a series of, you know, measurements of how well or how not well our democracy is performing. We'll probably touch on that, definitely. But I'd like to take you back a bit, because for history's sake, it's important to get context to where we are right now, because you've talked about that cycle. And I want to ask, why was it important for Nigeria to get into democracy? I know the agitations have been on for as long as possible. Eventually it came, but I hate to believe it was just Nigeria trying to follow the trends, because other countries were practicing democracy. Why was democracy important for Nigeria, the Nigerian experience?
You can't overstate it. If you remember, our country, our people, and Nigeria is an amalgam of very many diverse people. Some are Democrats at the core. As a matter of fact, I describe some as having democracy in their blood and in their DNA. And I hold the view that these people didn't learn democracy from anybody, not from the Greeks, not from America. It's in their DNA. Some, too, don't have democracy at all, not at all. Some are in between what we now call feudalism and democracy. Now, you bring these diverse people together. Certainly, there must have to be a friction, some sort of friction, particularly because the circumstance that brought them together was not anything noble at all. And we had thought there would be some effort made to coalesce, I think the word is coalesce, to get these people to think together, to bond together, to understand together, to act together, and to give them what I would call the Volkschaft, what the Germans call Volkschaft. Volkschaft is a spirit, the essence, the driving force, the driving spirit. What makes it to become, what makes it to become it. So this is the process we are all experiencing today. Unfortunately, it's taken so long a time. And it's taken this so long a time because I'm not too sure that some sincerity had gone into it. People pulling from different angles, people pulling into different directions, people pulling with different intentions, people pulling at different purposes. And of course, you know, once you have a vehicle or any moving object, you have the engine here, you have the engine here, and one is driving this way, one is driving this way, one is driving the end, one is driving the other end. You can be sure that wouldn't make progress.
Is these cross purposes, as you are suggesting, is that then the reason, or can that be the reason for the various agitations in pockets of the parts of the country?
Once there is cross purpose, it's just a matter of nomenclature. That is the reason. That is what is manifesting. That is what we call
So
it agitation.
what is making that that coalition, what is making it difficult? What's not allowing it to happen? Mind you, we have done 22 years in this Fourth Republic, and we have had elections over and over and over again. So I would have thought, I didn't think it was going to be so difficult. I would have thought that, once almost 500 people gather in the National Assembly, it should be a no-brainer for them to agree that we came here to represent X number of people from our various locations to foster their interests in the interest of unity and faith, peace and progress.
This is what you've just said is at the root of it. 500 people coming together. Who are these 500 people? What brought them together? Who brought them together? For what purpose are they together? That is what we're talking about.
You mean there is no purpose for the coming together?
That's what I mean by different purposes, different interests, different arrangements. And that is what we call now pulling at different points, going in their various directions. Some came there to make money. Some came there to pursue their own interests as a singular person or group. But I'm yet to see what I want to call a Nigerian interest. That's because there's a world of difference between nation and a country. Of course, Nigeria is not a nation. Nigeria is only a country. Now, over time, we probably would have been thinking that some efforts would have been made to convert Nigeria from a people of nations into a nation of nations.
I think you need to explain that a little further. People will be wondering, I thought a country
was a nation.
Was a nation.
No. A nation are people born together by a language, by culture, by aspiration. That's a nation. Igbo nation, for instance. Yoruba nation, for instance. And now we know the Hausa nation. And of course, the Fulani nation. When these nations come together, it becomes a country. What's a country? They're bound together by geographical boundaries and the government. Essentially, that is the difference between a country and a nation. And all these years, if you follow up all the trend and all these discussions everywhere, it is we are trying to build a nation. And trying to build it is simply effort, deliberate, conscious, spirited, determined, sincere, to convert this nation people into a nation country.
Please explain further. Because the last line of the national anthem, the first stanza, one nation bound in freedom, peace, and unity. Not one country bound in freedom, peace, and unity. Are you saying that's just poetry?
You took only the first stanza. You didn't take the subsequent stanzas. Now, God help us to build a place where we are none is oppressed. If that first stanza is it, the prayer, the other stanza wouldn't have been necessary.
The last line is to build a nation where peace and justice reigns.
Yes, it wouldn't have been necessary. Because if there is a nation, it wouldn't have need for that prayer.
But
unfortunately, I don't know if that prayer has been answered.
But how long does it take to build? I mean, I've seen huge projects, right?
Yeah.
Take maximum 10 years. The biggest project in the world, so, maximum 10 years or thereabouts. But we've been building this for, depending on at what point you're counting from.
Over 100 years.
So how long does it take to build? Or are we building the wrong project?
It depends on who is building and what you're building. If, for instance, you bring a quack, or I am a lawyer, I'm an economist, you bring me to build a study of this magnet. Oh, man, and you probably make your monies available to me. I have no idea what it takes to build. And I'm not honest enough to tell you I can build. And perhaps I conned you. Or maybe you who want me to build a project, you didn't do a due diligence on me to be sure I can build. And you hand over your money to me. In the process of it, somebody from your end comes to me and says, boy, let me bring that project to. I get share. Share it. And then we simply say, weigh my own share. You give them, and I share the money. And then, of course, another 100 years, this place will become a donkey.
I know you actually use pidgin, and that's actually how these things are done. The business is conducted, putting it in context. But there are a lot of opinions as to how we can build, right? Some say, you know, we need to go back to the foundation. You know what, forget this edifice. Go back to the foundation and ensure that the foundation is built well. Some say, well, we've built it this far, so let's edit. Let's do some tweaks here and there. How should this process actually go? Because clearly that's one of the major debates ongoing right now. Talk about the constitutional review and the rest. So how do we ensure that this edifice is built to taste?
It's straightforward. In the sense that, number one, what do you want to build, first of all? Number two, how serious are you about building? And these are the two determinant factors. But importantly, if you have a picture in your mind of what to build, you're asking, what's your drawing? What's your feasibility study? What's your QS? The quantity survey. What's your bill of quantities? What is it about? You put them together. You want to build. You sincerely want to build. Of course, you cannot give a time frame. Maybe 10 years, depending on what you want to build. Maybe 2 years, depending on what you want to build. But if ab initio you didn't want to build, you can be here for 20 years, for 40 years, for 50 years. And you're just wasting the time, deluding yourself, and perhaps deluding some people. But I'm sure that quite a number too will be sure and will know that you're merely grandstanding and deluding.
So you are for going back to the blueprints, the original master plan, and fixing it there?
If you ask me, we're all in Lagos. We've seen big buildings collapse because we're trying to tinker with it. Some of the things we can adjust, some of the things we can rework. And probably nobody talked about asking, you want to build 4 floors here? Is your base enough to carry 4 floors? What materials are you building with? Who are those building? These are the fundamental things. Unfortunately, we are not used to asking fundamental questions here. And so we keep wondering, we keep faltering. We keep moving from one confusion to another inconclusive.
Let me ask you, what are those fundamental questions? By that I'm asking, what are the ingredients we need to build this edifice called country or nation, whichever one? Because you've talked about the diversities.
Yes.
And I thought, there is strength in numbers. I thought it is possible to have unity in diversity, just as it is in India, as it is in the US, and pockets of nations here and there. You've talked about the Igbo nation, the Hausa nation, the, Fulani nation. Some would say there is the Yoruba nation, the Igbo nation. Some would say there is the Ijaw nation. Some would say there is...
These are the ideas.
I'm just saying there are those who would say that some would call minority, nations, that they also want to have a voice. So when it comes to asking the critical questions, what are those critical questions to ask if these nations are going to come together to be that one nation?
The first critical question is, are we ready to come together as one?
After 100 years plus?
Oh, yes. It's a continuous process. It's just like saying you're married. That you're married for 20 years, for 30 years, for 40 years, for 50 years. It does not stop you from constantly reassuring yourselves, I still love you. That's why people do 50 years wedding anniversaries. Is that correct? That's why they do 60 years wedding anniversaries. It's important to reassure. How do you reassure? And you do those things and say those things that makes everybody feel important. For instance, your neighbors. They came to meet your neighbor in Lagos or anywhere, and they became neighbors. Neighbors as maybe individual residences or neighbors as national residences from time to time, And as regularly too, you reassure yourselves that, neighbor, I mean no harm. Neighbor, I mean well. neighbor, I'm glad we're here. How do you do it? From time to time, during Easter, during Christmas, and from my background, during harvest. You get together. If you find, we have what we call ngo in my culture. Ngo is uba, you know. Uba is soya bean. You put them together, or you bean seed. You get them together. Some call it abacha now. You know, you put it together, and everybody participates in eating and all that stuff. What are you doing at the time? It's not just the food you're eating. That's not what it was. What's important that you're reassuring yourselves that this neighborhood is important, that this neighborhood is worthwhile, that we shall do everything we can to sustain and keep this neighborhood.
Well, one of the ingredients that's been so-called, that one can say, if we're going to go with your analogy continually, are the youths.
Very well.
And many argue that a good number of the founding fathers, some of which are still around, actually started making waves at about, on average age of 28, 29. Now, we celebrated Democracy Day yesterday, June 12, it's 28 years ago. But it would seem like that catchment are not getting the voice. Even though they have the potential, they're just not getting the voice they need to be able to contribute whatever quota they have into this soup of nations. So, what do we say to them? How do we begin the engagement for these young people?
Again, a straight talk. It goes back to the same fundamental. Do we really intend to build a nation of people? Or did we set out to build a meeting point of people who meet together to drink whiskey and drink brandy? If we're interested in building a nation, naturally, the youths are the builders. A man who is 50, his curve is moving downward. He's done a number of his achievements. A young man at 20, a young man at 23, a young man at 25 is boiling to succeed, to achieve. He reads, he works, he asks the critical questions. Around him, he's got the energy. And then, supposing we are thinking to build, you must get him involved.
I'll pause you there, right there, and then you continue on this same trajectory before we take you to our colleague in Abuja who also has questions for you. We're back in a moment. Thanks for staying with us. Mr. Chris Okeke is still with us. Please conclude your thoughts on the youth's angle that you're talking about.
Yes. Anywhere. You were referring to yesterday. A number of those progresses we all talk about today were made by youths. They have the longest stake. And so, a society is measured on account of how these youths are participating. They have the freshest of ideas. And they've seen you do these things in the last 20 years, and they say that they have an idea of what to do. And so, the more you allow them, the more new ideas come. And unfortunately, the system deliberately disallows them.
Deliberately. There's more on that, but let's take this to Abuja. Malkwe.
You know, listening to this discussion and the questions and answers being given, one would think that we're celebrating Independence Day because it would seem that every time we have an opportunity to interrogate where we currently are, we always have to go back to the foundation, which takes us back to Independence Day, even though some people will say, oh, no, that is amalgamation, perhaps, 1914. But from what you have seen, is it because of this foundation, this fact that we are yet to truly define what holds us together as the nation that we would like to be, is where we is what has now, accounted for where we currently are? How big an issue is this, especially when you look at the fact that we all agree and we all want that concept called democracy?
Is that to me? Yes. Oh, very well, thank you. Democracy, as we use them today, at least in Nigeria, have come to acquire a meaning, not exactly what it is, by those who started it. And if we define and agree that democracy, according to Abraham Lincoln, is government, government is decision-making, government is structure, government is arrangements, government is finishings, government of the people, by the people, for the people. If we agree that that is democracy, using that simplistic approach of Abraham Lincoln, and you come into our system where we have come to narrow democracies down to periodic elections, then thereafter, the huge gulf exists between they and us, between you and we, between my government and you, pure people, between our government and your people. Then we have essentially missed it at a critical point. And so, straight to it, you can't get a house, particularly the kind of edifice we're looking at, to build and to stay if there is no foundation. And unfortunately, if there are no, even when props are very, very unhealthy for buildings, if you ask a structural engineer, he will tell you so. But let's even pretend that there are no serious props, no commensurate props being made to keep this massive edifice from coming down. It's unfortunate.
Props that you'd like to see as we speak, what are some of the props which you would recommend, to let's say be built now or be developed to continue to hold this edifice together? Because I want to take your mind to the president's speech. One of the statements he made, which was a paragraph all by itself, was that he is committed to the continued corporate existence of this country. And he even made reference to the fact that he used to be a soldier. When he did become a Nigerian soldier, one of the things that he swore to was to give his life for this country. If those who are at the helm of our affairs, continue to say that they're willing to give their life to ensure that this country remains one, what are some of the props that you think should be developed right now to ensure that what we desire is what we get?
Yeah, there's a world of difference between rhetorics and reality. A world of difference. We've had such things in the last 60 years. Plenty of it, plenty of it. What we're talking about is we want to see those props. We want to see those foundational things. And it is those foundational things we're talking about. So, for instance, I'm reading the newspaper today that your newspaper review today that there's apprehension as a herdsman threatening to attack Delta. Now, you're careful to call it herdsmen, but you would have thought that by this morning, any group that is worth their salt would have been on top of the game. But our experience here is different. You might all be here, and those attacks will still take place. And nobody will be asked, why did it happen? These are the missing ingredients. A symbol, rather. Is it a symbol? the symptom of the core missing ingredients.
It's interesting.
Well, I don't know, in that sort of instance, because, I mean, there's plenty of theory. In that sort of instance, in the example which you have mentioned right now, what would you like to see? Because you, as you rightly pointed out, there will be fear, there will be apprehension when there are mentions of an attack. And it doesn't even have to be an attack from outside. Even if two communities which share the same affinity with each other, we have seen communal clashes over borders and things of the sort. Even if they were to attack each other, or there was imminent news of one community coming to attack another, there would be apprehension. But in the instance which you have already highlighted, what sort of props do you think will be needed in this instance?
When a crime is advertised to be committed, the person who represents the government, one of his major work is to ensure that peace and security is maintained. One thing about the jurisprudence of crime is the criminals try to hide it, try to conceal it, and try to create some obfuscations around it. But in this case, somebody is telling a government. Unfortunately, the people talking are not government themselves. This is government talking, sir. I would have thought that some preemptive things should have been done to be sure that such things does not happen. Like I said, I'm not saying nothing will happen by way of preemptive steps. But I'm saying if our experience is a guide, this is not the first time kind of ultimatums like this and threats like this are issued. And yet, people will cry and shout, and eventually nothing happens, and the damage is done, and we cry over the damage. And so, my take is, it's a serious matter.
I would have thought that laws are some of the props that we need. Policies, regulations are some of the props that can help to take us further to where we want to get to.
Exactly so. But unfortunately, it depends on what law are you talking about? What are the laws? Who made those laws? Who enforces them? These are three aspects of this that are too important. The person that made the law, and the person that should enforce the law. If the law is made protecting the aggressor, and the enforcement of the law is made protecting the aggressor again, then there are no props there.
Closely tied to that is the constitutional amendment process, perhaps one of the biggest activities being carried out at this point at the government level, the National Assembly especially. It will still trickle down to the state assemblies eventually. But there's always been that conversation. Take, for instance, the governor of Oyo State saying, this is a waste of time. We've had other people say, this is not what you should be doing right now. But you've had the government say, you have representatives in the National Assembly. How about you tell them what you want and they relay it through the system which we have right now? Basically, to me, sounds like saying, having to go through that process of going all the way back is tedious, cumbersome, and all that. Is it really that, or this is just a misunderstanding? Can there be a hybrid way to approach this, do a constitutional review, ensure that all the agitations are imputed into this?
Like I said again, ordinarily, normally, these would have been it. All over the world, those who operate in constitutions, at different times, amendments are made to them. American First Amendment, Second Amendment, Third Amendment, Fourth Amendment, they're still going. And it's normal. That should be the right thing to do. In our context, yes, right, good way to go. But the apprehension people have is, how good is this good? But beyond this apprehension, we talk about National Assembly. Good as it is, no problems with it. But there are the fundamentals that is at the roots of the agitations. It is these fundamentals at the roots that is propping up, or rather it is on these fundamental misapprehensions that the National Assembly is sitting. And the number are worried. And they're saying, yes, the National Assembly could mean well, may mean well. But looking at where they are seated, would they be able to answer to the yearnings of Nigerians?
How do you mean?
My apologies. Shouldn't they be? Because every senator, every member of the House of Representatives came from each of these pockets of nations that you talked about, the Igbo nation, the Hausa nation, the Yoruba nation, the Ijaw nation, the Kanuri nation, and all of that. They all came from there. So it is expected that they understand the agitations of their people and consequently should be able to represent those interests in the National Assembly. So if those interests are not represented, or rather, maybe I should ask it this way. How should they be representing those interests, if not through the same kind of constitutional review?
Yes, like I told you, on the face of it, the constitutional reviews are, on the face of it, good. I support it. But beyond that, you have how many senators? 109 or so, 108 or so senators. Out of this number, about 60% of them, or more than 60%, come from the north, isn't it? And this, there's a new phrase in the political jargon now. Democracy is a game of numbers. We've known that before now. But it's now been elevated to the status of a sense, in quotes. Now, if this number comes from here, just like in the House of Representatives, the old Kano state can overrun the entire Southeast and South-South put together. The old Kano state in the House of Representatives. You can see what we're talking about. So on the face of it, we need these changes. We need the amendment processes going on. At least it affords people some easing out of tensions and letting out some steam somewhere. But beyond that, when you come to the nitty-gritty, what is it likely to achieve?
So
That
for
is the
you,
worry.
if that constitutional amendment does not resolve this issue you have raised, then you don't think it will be termed successful, as it were?
That is not exactly so, because success could be 5%, it could also be 2%, it could also be 4%. After all, in our country, Nigeria, you have different cut-off marks for different exams.
Well, success is maybe 50% and above.
No, not in Nigeria. Whoa. You know, you write unit exams in Nigeria, you could score 70 over 100, that is success. Another could also score 4 over 100, it is also success. It depends on whose success you're looking at.
Okay, for you, do you trust this process to deliver some measure of significant success?
My opinion there is unimportant. I would rather wait for the end of the process.
You're a lawyer.
Oh, sure.
The Constitution is one of your strongest tools. So what are your expectations as a lawyer? Because every nation is built on laws. What are your expectations as a lawyer from this process, this constitutional review process?
This very one going on now?
Absolutely.
As different from what a constitutional mechanism should be, isn't it? These are two things.
I think you've pointed out that time and again.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll just put that to rest now. Please go ahead.
Now, so for today, I expect that this process should become wholesome, should become inclusive, should become forward-looking, should factor in the interests of Nigeria that should be built. not the elite interest that should be protected. I'm looking at this constitution holistically now. Nigeria that should be built, not an elitist interest that should be protected.
Are you optimistic?
Life is optimism. The day you lose optimism, you're going here.
You're using the elders' wisdom on us right now.
No.
But, I mean, are you optimistic that at the end of the process, people from diverse parts of the country, from different demographics, from different interests, will be happy?
Now, you see, when I say in my opinion, the National Assembly, I've told you how these things work. The intention of the man who is piloting the process. I remember I mentioned that intention. Now, I wish I have an idea of what their intentions are.
I think I have a problem with that.
Please.
Because many nations that we know, you will always hear them put their country first,
That's it.
as opposed to the interest of the leader.
That's correct.
So, if you are saying that it depends on the interest of the man heading the ship, some would say, wait a minute, so this nation is all about one individual as opposed to the country?
You remember I've told you before now, when I was talking about country and nations. The argument you're making would have been beautiful if there is a nation of nation country here. It would have been perfect. The argument of who becomes president, who doesn't become president, wouldn't even be necessary. The question of are youths there, are youths not there, wouldn't be necessary because the system would have factored in this and naturally it pulls in everybody. Now, people naturally stay on their own beats, achieve their own beats, and get themselves celebrated as they achieve. We're talking about the fundamental problem that we're talking about. What is this fundamental problem? I've always told you. We have the Igbo nation, we have the Yoruba nation, we have the Hausa nation, we have the Jah nation, we have the Fulani nation, and each of them appears to be working at cross purposes to each other. The cutting edge would have been, we'll come together and say, gentlemen, we are brothers, no superiority, no inferiority. No, this is my land and this is not your land. Those kind of argument. And we agree on the fundamentals, what I want to call the basic. That's why they call the Constitution the ground norm. The ground norm is, it is the norm on which other norms stand. That suggests it would have gone through a rigorous process to get there. And when we say rigorous process, don't forget, we're not talking about Constitution as a book. No, we're talking about the spirit of a people, codifying what those people represent. You saw me moments back speak our Nigerian slang. Now, slowly, it is emerging as a trend, isn't it? As our part of us. Almost everybody makes it. Supposing we take it a little further and design something around it, such that once you say it and you do it, we see it as the minimum beyond which no one can come.
You're talking about a national ethos.
That's what it is. Weaved around our spirits, our aspirations, and then bringing in everybody without descriptions and without discriminations.
But you talked about interests of different nations, as it were. I mean, it's a given, really, because people have their interests.
Yes.
Most people will think of themselves first before the next person. I think that's a natural human
It's a law of nature.
Law of nature, pretty much. But take a look at the measurement of Nigeria's democracy, both here and outside the country. We've seen figures about perception, the Democracy Perception Index. And when you go outside the country, you see that Nigeria is described as a hybrid democracy, as it were, a hybrid regime, which is pretty much a combination of autocratic and democratic dimensions or institutions. That's what Nigeria is generally termed to be, a hybrid of sorts. So this contradiction of the interests, trying to form all the interests into one interest, Is it what gave birth to this hybrid regime, or the hybrid regime gave birth to this widening gap between the interests?
Simple. What that description tells you is that you're yet to agree on what Nigeria is. That's the summary. Or what you said now, you're yet to agree. And this is what I told you, consistently I've said. Assuming Igbo and the Yorubas, for instance, is a country. I'm using that Louis as an example, nothing intended. The average Yoruba man would want to score 80% in his exam. I don't know if I'm correct. The average young boy in the class. The average Igbo boy wants to score 85%, 80%. And you see them involved in what I call positive, healthy competition of you won't score more than myself. So when you write exams, your father will not be working to say, even if you score 40, sorry, even if you score 20, even if you score 10, it doesn't matter. It's not in their DNA.
Well, I think that kind of thing kind of happened in the First Republic. But those were the days of the region.
Because, yeah, that was because in the First Republic, there was healthy competition. Okay. It is healthy competition that produces a synergy. It is the synergy that you move to become the spirit
of the nation.
It is the spirit that moves to become what drives us. Just like our national team, for instance.
But now we do not have regions anymore, we have states.
Yes.
And we have state governors.
Yes.
What would be your assessment of governors successively, perhaps especially the ones that we have now in the 36 states, because it would seem like the challenges are even a lot more now than previously. So what role do you see the governors playing, and how well do you think they are playing it for their people?
It's a straight argument again. Cheap argument. I've listened to those arguments. Cheap argument. Now, you can't, let me put it this way. A chick, for instance, cannot give birth to a chick and expect the chick and taunt the chick to say, you're not behaving like an eagle. Only eagles give birth to eagles, and chicks give birth to chicks. Simple analogy. These governors you're talking about are not from the atmosphere. They're not from Mars. They are all still products of the same dysfunctional system. And the dysfunctional system produces only dysfunctional outputs. And the outputs are the things we're all looking at. It's a simple... it's so clear to say.
I thought they got the jobs that they got because they knew that the system was dysfunctional and they could do something to make it
Did they make you that commitment before they came?
Isn't that the premise upon which they campaigned?
No, I'm not talking about premise. I'm not talking about premise. Have you seen a typical Nigerian campaign scenario? They go there to dance. Have you seen them talk any strong philosophy? You can't even say it, because the system we run here is a system that produces... I hope I'm not getting too emotional about this, but it doesn't produce the best of us, unfortunately. The best of us. Have you listened to what they, both in the media, both in the business world, both in everywhere, the best minds oftentimes become professors, isn't it? Then the next grades probably become corporate people. And then those who couldn't pass the exams properly. And they have to just, what are people call laymen, people go away. And these are people who are prepared to do anything. They need to be consoled. And the consolation is, okay, Shona talks, I know if you do anything. I'll go do something, I'll go Shona. I'm sorry, I'm going back again to what I call the Nigerian emerging worksheet.
So, finally, what would you want the Nigerian to know and to do going forward?
Number one, we would have to necessarily make a decision on what we want out of this project. I don't mean imposed opinion. I don't mean by fiat. I don't mean by compulsion. It's important, you all of us, including the young boy, your son, my son, all of us, make a decision on what we want. And we evolve a mechanism to put what we want into what we get. Naturally, the system, we don't need 20 years to build a country that you and you will be proud of. At least you see the foundations. Everybody comes and they say, you see, something's under construction. Everybody will be attracted to build. But when there's nothing under construction, and there'll be nothing to ask somebody to build.
It's interesting that you put it that way, because some would right now cite what happened in Rwanda and how Rwanda has been able to build back perhaps better than before. But we have to thank you very much for your time this morning. Chris Okeke is a legal practitioner and policy analyst. Unfortunately, we weren't able to look at any policy, but hopefully some other time when you're here. Thank you very much for your time.
I appreciate it.
Yes.
Well,
Sunrise is back after this break. Do stay with us.
Protesters getting ready for action.
Hands up for the killings now! Hands up for the killings now! End KB killings now! End KB killings now! I want to yarn.
Hundreds of them, mostly youths, have turned out for the protest.
Freedom coming by struggle. Freedom by struggle.
It's Nigeria's Democracy Day, but for these protesters, it's not a day for celebration as they take to the road, disrupting vehicular movements while chanting their demands. Among the protesters are some members of the Shiite movement in Nigeria who are demanding the release of their leader, Sheikh Ibrahim El-Zakzaky, who has been incarcerated for over 5 years.
Free Sheikh Zakzaky! Free Sheikh Zakzaky! Security is the paramount thing to any citizen. We have no security in the country, high level of banditry, high level of kidnappings, high level of corruption and all.
Some minutes into the protest, policemen arrived at the scene. They pulled the trigger and fired tear gas canisters at the protesters who take to their heels. Meanwhile, just in front of the Unity Fountain, a pro-Buhari group is holding a rally, displaying placards with inscriptions of solidarity with the government.
Freedom of speech should not be abused. I am not saying that everybody should not be allowed to air out his view, but the truth is it shouldn't be abused, and you shouldn't be found at any time inciting the general populace or issuing out fake news. In most cases, we are seeing situations where people are found of giving out fake news or are being more politically motivated. This country is suffering from politicians. They mislead the youth, they give you a wrong direction, and all we do, we keep following them. Now, Nigeria must change our attitude, and everything we are doing must be scrutinized.
A lone anti-Buhari protester who walked in here was mobbed, but the police came to his rescue as he ran into the Unity Fountain. The protest continues as the group insists that the Buhari-led administration is doing its best to protect the country's democracy.
Government is like a continuity. Now we can celebrate railway, You can now go from Abuja to Kaduna. You know, yesterday you can see what happened in Lagos. Lagos to Ibadan now, you have railway. And I tell you that no government has the miracle of development.
June 12 replaced May 29 as Democracy Day after President Muhammadu Buhari signed the Public Holiday Amendment Bill into law in 2019, recognizing the new Democracy Day. Empress Simon, Channels Television News.
Yes, you're still watching Sunrise Daily. And yes, we're moving to another segment. Protest, some people will say, is one of the fundamental things that is allowed in a democracy. And we saw some of that on Democracy Day. There had been word that it was going to be much bigger, much stronger protest across the country. But we did see on Friday some youth groups pulling out. For instance, the National Association of Nigerian Students, NANS, called off their own protest, saying that they were not going to be a part of it on Saturday because some politicians had plans or had concluded plans to hijack the protest. Nonetheless, there were still protests. Right here in the Federal Capital Territory, it was seen that there were protests for and against I don't know, would it be for and against the president now, or for and against democracy? I don't know. But it was a fundamental human right to be out on the streets, and they were out on the streets. Some carrying placards saying the president had to go, and some saying, oh, the president had done well. We have one of them in our studios this morning, Mr. Igwe Martin, is co-convener, Youth and Civil Society Coalition for Development. Sir, you're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you, Mobi.
Well, we saw you right there at the Unity Fountain, which has now been barricaded, but there were some people who were outside of that fountain to protest. Why were you out on Saturday? What was your protest about?
Well, thank you so much. I need to make some corrections. It was a rally. It was a Democracy Day rally. It was not a protest. And I want to use this opportunity to thank channels for their rational reportage of the incident that happened there. There were a lot of propaganda on the social media. And I can tell you that it was a Democracy Day rally. This is not the first time we organized it. The Coalition for Youth Development, led by Comrade Amin Aminu, every year we coordinate youth all over the country. And this year we decided that it has to be in Abuja. Coincidentally, there were other groups that were planning to do their own protest. I don't know what they call it, but our own was a Democracy Day rally in appreciation of the little things that must have done from 1999 till date. And we thank God that some persons that were there to give a negative impression to what we are doing were stopped, and we told them that it can never be business as usual.
What were the standpoints of your rally?
The standpoint of our rally is to celebrate June 12th and Democracy Day. Since 1999 till now, it would be laughable to say that nothing has been done in terms of democratic dividend. It may fall short of some people's expectations. It may not be what people want. When some administration comes, people will have their political agenda. If it is not achieved, they will go underground to make sure that they pull down the house they built politically. But I want to let you know that we will constructively engage the youths and let them know what is right and mobilize them to do what is right. If you remember, these same actors that protesting, they were there during the former administrations. They protested, and they will misinform the public. I was a former student secretary. Sometimes students will come out of the street. They don't even know the reason why they came out. But the actors and the leaders of the protest will have something within them that is their personal interest. Along the line, when the interest is settled, the students, sometimes you see them in prison. They don't. If you go to police, they don't even know why they're there. So we don't want such things to continue. And I thank the gentlemen of the media who reported the real situation. And I can assure you that enough is enough, where youth actors that knows the truth mobilize in guise of anything, whether revolution or something like that, to come and distract coordinated activities, that this is not the first time we have done it.
It's a democracy.
Yeah, it's a democracy.
It's a democracy. Some people say that, you know, people have a right to express themselves. People have a right to dissent from your own opinion.
Sure.
They have a right to not be content with what is currently the state of the nation. I just want to know what your thoughts are, though, with regards to what the current state of the nation is, because I was trying to see what was on the banners that you carried in your rally. Sorry, I keep using the word protest. In your rally, what were some of the things that you were rallying for or against?
What we are trying to let the Nigerians and possibly the international community know is that democracy is a journey, not a destination, and the media will play their own role. Women, market women, teachers, local government administrators, ministers, senators, they'll come together, you know, and strengthen the democratic process. I cannot sit down here and tell you that Nigeria don't have problem. I'm aware of the insecurity situations in the country. And just like I told some of them after our rally, that we can come together. We are talking about issue of local government autonomy, you know. Sometimes when police, divisional police officers run into criminals in their local community, they can't use their vehicle to 3 or 4 kilometers chasing criminals. They'll complain about fuel. But you see a situation whereby when you give this local government autonomy, local government their autonomy, things will run well in terms of conflict resolution in the local community. So I can't come here and tell you that Nigeria doesn't have problem, but I can tell you that we can collectively unite and solve it, instead of misinforming, misguiding, you know, the society. Some of these actors, I know them, they know me, you know, they know that I know what they are pursuing, and I continue to tell them before, we have not been talking. But this time around, we will come out and tell them that it can never be business as usual.
I do not know what you mean by misinforming and misguiding. Misinforming and misguiding who?
Well, now you can see they said the president Buhari must go. The leaders and the team leaders know the democratic process of removing the president. We have still a working Senate. We have the House of Representatives, where some of these things can be channeled. So in a democratic dispensation, you go out and you say that a president must go. Well, that is also the dividend of democracy, because that's freedom of speech, and they have their right.
Indeed, they very much do. I mean, sometimes, you know, the leadership, it was same, what they call that now, the National Assembly could take the cue. We've seen tons of protests to the National Assembly, and oftentimes these matters are debated, these matters are brought to the fore. They say, oh, we'll take on this issue. Why do you think, though, that people feel that we are in a state where these sentiments cannot be freely expressed? That if the people are discontented and, you know, wish to express their feelings with regards to discontent, that they feel stifled. Take, for instance, the protests, some of which were, you know, had placards like Buhari must go, were dispersed with tear gas. Should that have been the scenario in a democracy?
Well, if you monitor that protest very well, it is just a protest by Shiites group, quoted by some remnants of so-called activists. You know, if you watch, the Shiite has been into some of these protests, and when you see some of these actors, they are talking about Zaizaki, they are talking about Buhari Moscow, it is confusing. And instead of allowing a group that you don't even understand their intentions, you understand, I'm aware that they were contacted to make sure that, you know, they channel their grievances, you understand, in a manner that they will be heard, but they still persisted. You know, that's to demonstrate to you that maybe there may be a sinister intention. So, and I think what the police also did was right, because choosing a democracy day, you understand, to do those kind of protests by some characters that, which we don't know their intentions, you know, I think what the police did was right.
You know, it's a very, very dicey situation because, first and foremost, some people will ask whether or not Shiites, if they are also Nigerians.
They are.
If they are Nigerians and they subscribe to the democracy, you know, should their own right to protest be abridged as well? There's a huge question mark there. But, you know, whatever we understand very much the relationship between the authorities and the Shiites, especially those who are affiliated with El-Zakzaky, and how their group has been proscribed in certain parts of this country. But that is on the one hand. In Lagos, I mean, some people will say if that's what happened in Abuja, we cannot say that the protests in Lagos, for instance, were also done by Shiites. It could have been a certain group of Nigerians as well expressing discontent. I mean, they were planning to march to the Gani Family Square, which is now known as a center for protest. And still, they too were dispersed with tear gas.
Well, I can tell you what happened in Abuja because I was part of the Abuja protest. I was the co-convener. But also in Lagos, I can't be in Abuja and be in Lagos and know what is happening in Lagos. You understand? But I can tell you that most of these protests sometimes they have internal political motives, which if you get the information, you act appropriately so that, you know, some youths that will be mobilized with the intention they don't know anything about cannot be victims, you understand, of those political actors.
Your protest was not dispersed with tear gas. Oh, your rally, sorry, was not dispersed with tear gas, was it?
It was not dispersed. We notified that we are going to do our annual rally, because this is not the first time. You know, if you Google now, you see that youth leadership all over the country every year, led by one Comrade Aminu from Jigawa.
Would you agree with those who say that your own protest wasn't dispersed with tear gas because you were pro-government?
That is what they call it, that we are pro-government. We were invited by the CP. They asked us what is the essence of this protest. We tell them the essence of this rally. We told them that this is not the first time we have done it. We have done it in Jigawa. We have done it in Kano. You know, the president himself said that, okay, this time around we have to do it in Abuja. And we came into Abuja, CP told us that there were Shiites that are also planning to have their own protest. And we told them this is what we want to do, this is what we want to do, this is what we want to do. Because, you know...
so you don't think that you were not dispersed because you're pro-government, you think it's because they understood your motives?
Yes. We had a discussion with them. We were invited by the security agencies. We told them this is it. This is what we have done last year. This is what we have done 3 years ago. You know, it is not only youths. You know, YCD is a national body, and some of the civil society groups that are working with YCD came together and agreed that it has to be here. And they invited us, and we told them, this is what we are going to do. And they agreed with us, and we went in line with what we agreed. You know, they're saying pro-government. The actors that are doing the protest, they were the one that called the protest for former administration, you know. So can we continue to deceive the youth to be career protesters of intention they don't know anything about?
Let's flip this to Lagos now. I think my colleague have questions for you. Gentlemen.
Well, thank you, Mark. Mr. Martin, I just want to clear this out. What population or what section of the youth and civil society are you speaking on behalf of, or are you rallying for?
Well, we are rallying to appreciate the little efforts that we have had as a democratic government. It is a national rally. There's no section. We had people from Igbo extraction. We have civil societies from Southwest. We have civil societies from the North. And this is not the first time, just like I told you, that we have done this. We have been doing it in the last 5 years. YCD is a national youth body. Other civil society actors are national civil society actors. They come together to call for peace and unity in the country for us to unite despite challenges and collectively face our collective problems.
I'm not sure if you saw this, this video of some of the pro-President Buhari group attacking an anti-Buhari protester. Now, this was in Abuja, where you are, where you say you know at least what transpired. So is there any rationale to doing this? I mean, why go to this extent? If you're pro-government, I mean, you could rally or protest in the way you deem fit, but going violent, do you think that's right in a democratic context?
But you can see that we controlled the protester that came. Incidentally, he thought that that was where their own is holding, and he came out not knowing that this is not where their own is holding. And we tried our best to make sure that, you know, he was not lynched, because I think he came there thinking that this is where their own is holding. And if you see what we did, our youths made sure that, you know, he was handed over to the police. And that is also that one we are trying to make sure that we manage conflict. He came there out of ignorance. He thought that that is where their own is holding. And we tried our best to make sure that the youths that were most obliged did not manhandle him. Well, and we succeeded in doing that.
I didn't hear you condemn that act of attacking that young man. All you said was it was handed over to the police. I was asking that, is this acceptable?
Come again?
I said, I didn't hear you condemn that act. If you can hear me, I didn't hear you condemn that act of attacking the young man. Yes, you said he didn't know where his people were, he got there by mistake or whatever. But I asked you if you think this is right. And I wanted to get your opinion on this. Are you condemning the act of attacking him? Because, I mean, this might be a trend as we see it.
If you remember, if you watch the video very well, all the actors that were around him were people we mobilized, and we made sure that they didn't harm him. We struggled to make sure that they didn't harm him. What he did was not right. To come where we are doing a peaceful rally and raised the president must go. The president must go.
So is that why he was
what he
beaten?
Did was not right, and I can assure.
So because he walked, I mean, there's freedom of movement. I mean, we're talking about democracy here. But so he moved to where you are carrying out your rally, and then he was beaten. Are you trying to explain this out and condone this? Because clearly this is wrong.
Sometimes we must not misuse the right to freedom of speech. You know, sometimes, sincerely, we must not misuse that we have the right of freedom of speech or freedom of expression. Is also not the right for us to talk nonsense, you know. And I can assure you that the boy accepted that he made a mistake, and we made sure that he left there unhurt.
But are you accepting that you made a mistake as well?
Most of the things he came with, we made sure. Yes,
Mr. Martin.
We made sure that he went back with it.
Mr. Martin, your people assaulted him.
And he apologized.
Beat him up. Your people assaulted him, beat him up. Are you accepting that you made a mistake as well?
Well, I think it was not a mistake. It was not a mistake, and I can show you that it was not a mistake. It was a mistake on his own side. It was a mistake on his own side, not our own side.
Is your group a violent group, Mr. Martin?
Where we are. There was a conspiracy.
I understand.
There was a conspiracy.
Let me clear this out.
Our rally, and
right. Let me clear this out. I mean, you had police presence, right? And you chose to take laws into your hands, as it were, by beating that young man up. Is your group a violent group? Because from what we're seeing, you seem to be using violence to pass your message across.
No, sir. We are a peaceful organization which have been peaceful. If you monitor some of those rallies, the one we did in Jigawa, the one we did in Kano, there was no altercation from anywhere. And
this one in Abuja. Let's talk about this one in Abuja, Mr. Martin.
YCD has been a peaceful organization.
Yes, but your people beat someone up. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. Why would you do that and still say you're a peaceful group?
Well, you know, sometimes when you mobilize people in thousands, you know, you'll also manage to coordinate them accordingly. When we saw what was about to happen, we also sent the leaders of the team to make sure that he left there without being harmed. And we coordinated it with the police, and we thank the police for what
Mr. Martin, this man was...
Because they told us that they are going to make sure that there's peace.
Mr. Martin, that man was harmed. He was beaten.
They tried their best.
Yeah, I understand. That man was harmed. He was beaten. So I don't understand what you mean by he wasn't harmed. Have you handed over the people that beat him up to the police, maybe for investigation? Because that's a clear case of assault.
We'll be having our National Executive Council. We are going to decide on that. And if we hear from the actors and why they did so, if it is appropriate to report them to the authorities, we will do the needful.
You don't think it's appropriate to report this to the police? I mean, the police was there, actually, but you don't think you should escalate this?
Until we get the collective reports of the rally.
No, this is something you witnessed.
We'll get the reports.
Do you still need the report?
If we deem it fit.
Right. Let me just ask you, if you were beaten up, for example, by anti-Buhari protesters, would you report to the police? Would you want any action taken?
I don't, well, let me get the question again.
If you were beaten up by anti-Buhari protesters, just as that man was beaten up, would you want any action taken by the police?
Well, I don't think such thing will happen. And,
I understand. This is hypothetical. I am asking you, if you were beaten up, would you want any action taken by the police?
Until the time comes.
Let me hand this over to Markwe.
Well, I don't know. What's your own take? I mean, because I still haven't gotten the point of your rally. I mean, the rallying call, so to speak, or your rallying cry. But first and foremost, I don't know whether you want to quickly shed light on that. What did you say you were rallying for?
First of all, just like I told the press, we are rallying that at least we have a country called our own, that we call Nigeria. We are rallying to also appreciate some of the little things that has been done during the...
To appreciate who or what?
Appreciate the people that made us to be part of a democratic process. You know, appreciate Gani Fayemi. You saw people going to the Gani Fayemi's place in Lagos. You know, June 12th was a popular day.
You told me that you cannot be in two places.
Yes. But I
told that the people who were going to Gani Fayemi's place were dispersed.
I had it from you. They didn't go to my father's house. They went to Gani Fayemi's house.
Indeed. You say that you were rallying to celebrate people like Gani Fayemi. Is that what you're saying?
No. Appreciate their efforts for the commitment they made towards democracy that we enjoy today.
Do you think that the democracy that we enjoy today is democracy indeed? Do you think that Nigerians, from your own assessment, are people satisfied with the democracy that we're practicing today?
Everybody cannot be satisfied in a democratic process. That means it is not democracy. If you remember, we have many political parties with different interests. You see a situation whereby when everybody is satisfied, that means there's a problem somewhere. Not everybody will be satisfied. But I can assure you that we are making progress. And democracy itself is, just like I told you, is a journey, not a destination. You understand? It's a work in progress. The media will do their own, as channels are doing. Other organizations will come together. I wouldn't like Nigerian development to be tied under one person and say that he has the magic wand for development. He has the magic wand for everything. No. There are some structures, they are built strong institutions, do you understand? And we make sure that we collectively work together. If you watch what somebody was saying about regional issues here, there are issues in the region that are supposed to be addressed. And when we collectively come together and address these issues, you know, just like electoral reforms, you know, so that let the popular person win. In a situation whereby you select people and appoint them, there will not be peace. You know, there are some avoidable problems here and there. Issues of unemployment, you know, economic inequality. You know, we also use that opportunity to advise our youth that when you graduate, you don't need to carry your files and say that it got to be government jobs.
Mr. Igwe Martin, I have to say thank you for coming on Sunrise Today this morning.
Thank you so much, Mok.
He is the co-convener of Youth and Civil Society Coalition for Development. He's been speaking to us here in our Abuja studios. We have a number of mails from you. We have this one from Demola Alalade, talking about Democracy Day protest. He said, protest or rally is a healthy way to express opinions, but it must be well coordinated and not hijacked by those who might want to use such medium to perpetrate crime. Freedom of expression through a well-coordinated rally should be allowed, but must not be seen as such that will cause chaos in the country. That's Demola's point of view.
I agree.
Well, we got this other one, Democracy Day, protest versus rally. Says, protest is a fundamental human right, but in Nigeria, it seems to be a crime met with force and violence. When it is pro-government, it is termed a rally, but when anti-government, it is termed protest. Is rally lawful and protest unlawful? Why do we play cheap politics in Nigeria, he asks. Unfortunately, the agents themselves seem not to know they are victims of the same mess the protest is about. Greg, time.
Well, very quickly, James is talking about assault on protesters. Says, this is our problem in Nigeria. When you are wrong, you're wrong. Is it right to beat someone or attack someone because he exercised his freedom?
And Shagun Abiodun says, do you know the most lucrative business in Nigeria is politics? We must make it less lucrative to allow sincere people partake in it. Let the salary and allowances of public office holders be determined by the minimum wage. They should be stopped from executing projects. And Olagunju also, we see your mail here talking about building a system in Nigeria. We're totally out of time. We have to thank you so much for sending in your comments and mails. Thank you so much for not being deterred. I'm Malcolm Yusuf.
I'm Kado Hikiolu.
I'm Ayo Makinde. Have a great day.